I think by now many people saw what Xianyun or Cloud Retainer Kit looks like and what she does. However, in this video I want to talk a little bit how I think Xianyun is gonna make Furina a lot better um, in the teams where you wanna play Xianyun. And there are actually two reasons for that. But before that, let's talk a little bit about Cloud Retainer Kit itself. Cloud Retainer's E, you can think of it as like Kazuha E. However, while you're in the air, you can press it 2 more times to deal more damage. Uh, but it's kind of useless in most of the teams before C6. Um, it's just there to provide you with energy and give you a small buff from her other passive. Her ult heals in a similar way like Jhin ult does. It heals a little bit less on the cast, but it heals more over time. And what's more importantly, her ult also allows you to do a plunge attack on any characters. Basically, any character becomes shallow. You can jump high enough to do a plunge attack. Her A4 is her main passive. It gives a buff the same way Shanhe does, but only on plunge attacks. The buff is pretty big. If we compare it to Shanhe numbers, Xianyun buff is 2 times bigger than Shanhe, more than 2 times actually, and it only works for one enemy, so it's a single target buff, meaning per one plunge attack you can buff can happen only for one enemy. So in AoE, only if you hit 2 enemies with a plunge attack, only for one enemy the attack damage will be increased, and the buff can proc up to 8 times. Her Ascension one is alright. It gives up to 10% crit rate depending on how many enemies you hit. However, the big problem with this passive is that her Ascension 4 buff is single target, so you have a lot of reasons to play her in single target. But then her Ascension 1 just gives only 4% crit rate, which is fine, but nothing crazy. Though I must say her buff is going to scale very well with crit rate, so that's nice, but still it's nothing big. Now let's talk a little bit about the problem that Furina has right now. If you look at the most popular healers for Furina teams, it's Baiju, Jhin, and the other healers that could be used are Charlotte, Mika, Barbara. There's also Noelle, but about her I will talk a little later. If you would look at these healers, they all provide most basic of what their element does, and well, obviously healing on top of that. Baiju provides Dendro application, Jhin provides Viridescent Veneer, Mika and Charlotte provide cryoparticles, Barbara provides Hydro application. The reason why Baiju is arguably the best with Furina right now is, well, because he was already used in teams for his Dendro application. So he already had something useful going for him, but if you would compare him to Nahida or even Dendro main character, he will be quite a lot worse when it comes down to Dendro application. However, the character with who Furina competes the most, Xingqiu, he provides healing and damage reduction, meaning you can play not just a healer who provides most basic value, but a character who gives bigger utility instead of that healer. With Xingqiu, you can play Nahida instead of Baiju, you can play Kazuha instead of Jhin, and so on. Furina's problem is that she kinda takes 2 slots for a team. She makes you downgrade one character in a team for a healer of that element. Now, imagine a world where Kazuha has absolutely the same kit, but his ult would heal just the way Jhin ult does. Now Kazuha provides you with healing needed for Furina, but also provides you with utility, and he becomes best in slot for both Furina and Xingqiu teams. Now you have much more reason to play Furina over Xingqiu, because you don't need to downgrade other character in a team to play Furina. Now the choice between Furina and Xingqiu would be only about how much hydro application you need, and do you need that damage reduction that Xingqiu provides. This is why Noelle is kinda standing out of all healers. You want to have a healing like she does, and in Noelle teams, Furina is already much more popular than Xingqiu, because you don't need to downgrade a team to make Furina work. Noelle and Furina work very well already. And all this is important when it comes down to Xianyun, because this is the first reason why she's gonna make Furina better. Xianyun provides unique utility to the team, which is allowing anyone to do plunges, and she also provides quite a big buff to the plunges on top of that. Xianyun is a healer who is not a downgrade to anyone, because she's the only one who can give you this type of utility. So the decision between Xingqiu and Furina is much simpler here. It's just about what do you need from Xingqiu and Furina. Do you need Furina's buff, or you need Xingqiu's higher hydro application and damage mitigation? It's not anymore about how team will change because of Furina, because you need to slot in a healer. And that's the first reason why Xianyun is gonna make Furina better, because no downgrade of a team is needed to play Furina. On top of that, when you plunge, you can't do normal attacks. You can do them before plunges, but it will lead to less swords from Xingqiu's ult. Now to the second reason. In short, Xianyun's buff scale very well with Furina's buff, but let's see it in game, because luckily we have a character whose buff works the same way, and that character is Shenhe. So, Makaya currently has Soul Blade, no artifacts, and if I'm just going to try to use his E on a bishop, it will deal 132 damage. Now if I'm just going to use Shenhe's E, I get basically 1000 flat damage on top of that. Now to see the difference, I equipped him with attack sense. And well, if I'm just going to use his E normally, it is 194 damage. But if I'm gonna use it with Shenhe, it is 1196. So I still have this 1000 flat damage. The damage increase that Shenhe provides was not increased by an attack. However, if I'm going to try to use the cryo damage goblet, the result will be completely different. Now, if I'm going to use normal Kaya's E, it will deal 194. So basically the same as it was with attack sense, but with Shenhe now just 163. So the Shenhe now the Shenhe damage increase was increased by the goblet. What it basically means is that buffs like Shenhe scale well with damage percent buffs, and not scale with attack. You can increase your character damage by attack, but not the buff that Shenhe provides itself. This damage will also be further increased by crit, so this additional 1000 damage from Shenhe may not seem like much, but with everything together, it is gonna be quite a lot bigger. And all of this is true to Xianyun. It's gonna scale even better with her, since her buff is bigger than Shenhe buff. The most popular attack support, Bennett, is gonna work with Xianyun and characters in those plunge teams, of course, just because his attack buff is very big. However, if we compare Bennett buff to Furina buff in Xianyun teams, Furina will increase the buff that Xianyun provides, and she is gonna increase it quite a lot. She's gonna give up to 75 damage percent at C0, and that's a lot more damage. And in the end, the gap between Bennett buff and Furina buff becomes smaller, while Furina also deals a lot of damage off field on top of that. If we summarize it all, in Xianyun teams, Furina already fits great, because you might as well play her since you don't need to downgrade your team to play Furina. But also Furina's buff itself works very well with what Xianyun gives. Now, it is only true if you're using Xianyun's buff. If you're just going to play Xianyun in a team where you would use Jean, yes, she would be basically kinda the same as Jean. But if you do use plunge attacks and you do use her buff, she will synergize with Furina very, very well. So both of these things together are gonna make Xianyun and Furina a great synergy, and I think it's pretty interesting. Hope you enjoyed the little discussion, and see you some other time.